While we're waiting for questions from the in-person audience, we do have a couple questions that have been submitted online. One from Nate. If the creation includes man, whom dualism claims is composed of an immaterial and material substance, how would God, being independent and creator of creation, imply that God is immaterial?
I don't see the force of the question. What is implied in Genesis 1:1 is that God brings the entire material universe into being, and he already exists without it. And the fact that the creation would include finite immaterial spirits is no reflection on his transcendence or incorporeality.
Any questions from the audience here?
We have three that are somewhat separate. One of them concerning the exegesis of Genesis 1:1. Moses Maimonides, also known as Rambam, makes the explanation that Rashit is not chronological time, but preeminence, citing Numbers 24:20 as Amalek was the Rashit of the nations.
Yes.
And he was not chronologically prior to the rest of the nations. And so, first pushback is, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I think in the context, it is clearly talking about temporal priority. It is the absolute beginning of the created order. And then you have the days enumerated: day one, the second day, the third day, the fourth day, and so on. So it seems to me, in context quite clearly, that it's talking about temporal priority. This is not based upon the meaning of the word Reshith. In English and in Hebrew, you can talk about beginning in the sense of rank, for example, or importance. That's certainly true. But the question is, in context, how is it best explained? I think in the beginning here indicates a temporal beginning.
Okay. Second one, if I'm permitted.
Yes.
You mentioned God being spatially, how did you say it? Some Christian theists conceive God as a soul being extended throughout the whole body of the person. I'm not going to quote everything. But how would you avoid the classic Stoic pantheism in that sense of God being a permeation of the physical universe?
Well, it would be that unlike the Stoic conception of spirit as a kind of thin, ethereal substance, God is immaterial. He's like a mind that is extended throughout the universe and wholly present at every place in the universe. On the Stoic conception of spirit as a sort of thin substance throughout the universe, it seems to me that it would not be wholly present at any place in space, that there would be part of it there and part of it elsewhere. So in order to be wholly present at every place, I think it's plausible that God would need to be immaterial, like the soul in the body.
And finally, you mentioned Jacob's encounter at Peniel.
Yes.
Which classic Jewish and Hebrew exegesis would not state that was the Lord, because the divine name of God is not mentioned there anywhere in that passage. But the classic Jewish conception is that Jacob was actually wrestling with Samael, who was the guardian angel of Esau, and with the context of the passage being sandwiched between Jacob running from Esau and Jacob making peace with Esau, that seems to be coherent.
So the question concerned the encounter of Jacob with the man at Peniel. Could this have been not an encounter with God, but with some sort of principal angelic being?
As Jewish exegetes claim.
As Jewish exegetes have claimed. I don't carry any brief for saying this had to be the Lord. If it was an angel, it would be an example again of taking on a material form, which is the main point that I'm wanting to make. But I must say that when you read the passage, the person asks Jacob what his name is, and he renames Jacob and calls him Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. And then when Jacob says, tell me your name, the person says, why is it that you ask my name? And simply refuses to answer. And so Jacob calls the name of the place Peniel, saying, I have seen God face to face, and yet my life is preserved. So it seems as though it's presented as a materialization of God himself and not just a lower angelic being.
All right, let's turn to a question from the online audience from Leonard Kraft. Should we understand God's interactions with Adam and Eve in Genesis 2 and 3 as temporary physical theophanies, of course told in the mytho-historical genre?
I argue against that position. I think that that would be an example of an anthropomorphic description of God walking in the garden, forming Adam out of the dust, taking a rib from his side to shape a woman, and that these should not be understood as materializations of God. And I would argue that for two reasons. First, it doesn't have the language of theophany. For example, in Genesis 18, in the theophany of Abraham, it says, the Lord appeared to Abraham by the oaks of Mamre. There's nothing like that in Genesis 2 and 3 to indicate that this is some sort of theophany to Adam and Eve. But secondly, and decisively, God is described anthropomorphically in Genesis 2 and 3 when he is not appearing to Adam and Eve. When he shapes Adam out of the dust of the earth and forms him, Adam doesn't yet exist. So that can't be a theophany to Adam. When he forms Eve, he makes Adam unconscious and forms Eve out of the rib of his side. So again, that can't be a theophany. So it seems to me that what you've got there are quasi-mythical, anthropomorphic descriptions of God that the author of the Pentateuch knew was incompatible with the presentation of the transcendent God of Israel in Genesis 1:1.
Here's a quick question from the online audience from Steve Kreutz. Can you clarify the difference between saying God is, quote, without a body versus saying God is, quote, immaterial? It seems that these descriptions are synonymous.
Oh, not at all. Think of the soul here. The soul is an immaterial substance, but the soul may have a body. It can be incarnate, and then it could lose the body in death, and the soul could exist in a disembodied state. So whether the soul is embodied or disembodied, the soul is not a physical substance. It's not identical with its body. And similarly with the incarnation. In the incarnation, the second person of the Trinity assumes a human nature so that he has a human body, but he is still the immaterial God who has assumed that nature, and he still has all the properties of deity.
Maybe one more question from the audience here, and then we'll move on.
I'm not aware of any biblical case for God not being immaterial. Or is there a reason why someone would argue against the case you've made here today?
He's not aware of any case against God's incorporeality, so is there any reason that we're arguing this? It would be based upon these anthropomorphic descriptions of God in bodily terms and the theophanic appearances of God in corporeal terms. That would be the only grounds for thinking that God is a physical or material object. And I think that those are extraordinarily weak arguments, even taken in isolation, but taken in the whole context of Scripture, those 5 strands of teaching, it seems to me that those do not provide good reason for thinking that God is a material being.